I wish to acknowledge the presence of members of National Association of Ogun State Students, staff and students of Adebo Excellent Secondary School, Karu, Nasarawa State, staff and students of Al-Hikman International Academy, Maraba, Nasarawa State, all in our gallery to observe our proceedings. I wish them a fruitful observation. You can now sit down. Thank you. Leader of the Senate. Point of orders, Senator Odia.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm studying on order 42 and 52, and if the President permits, I will read.
Yes, go ahead.
Shall, if possible, be referred to the Senate President before commencement of the day's proceedings, and the President of the Senate shall refuse to allow the claims unless he is satisfied that the matter is definite and urgent. 52. Notice shall not be dispensed with in the case of a motion or in respect of any other proceeding for which notice is required, except with the consent of the Senate President and the general consent of the senators present. Mr. President, with heavy heart, I announce to this section the death of Senator John Osegali Oriafo. Is one of our senators that died, and if the President permits, I will move a formal motion.
Distinguished colleagues, Senator Clifford Odia brought this issue of former distinguished senator in his constituency. We need to leave of the Senate for us to take this motion. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Odia, please keep to the agreement that we have.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The co-sponsors of this motion include Senator Mohammed Ubani Shitu from Jigawa Northeast, Senator Abu Ibrahim, Katsina South, Senator Matthew Hurohide, Edo South, and Senator Francis Alamikena, Edo North. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the Senate knows with great sadness the passing to the great beyond of Senator John Osegali Oriafo. The Senate also knows that Senator John Osegali Oriafo was born on the 18th of October 1941 to the family of Mr. and Mrs. Osegali Oriafo in Nigeria community of Atuagbo, Unoya in Irua, East and Central Local Government of Edo State. The Senate further knows that after his primary and secondary education, he then proceeded to Baptist Nursing School, Eku, where he bagged nursing certificate in 1962. He worked briefly as a nurse in Royal Orthopedic Hospital, Lagos, in 1963. Senate are aware also that Senator John Osegali Oriafo later qualified as a medical doctor and worked briefly with Lagos University Teaching Hospital, LUT, in 1973. But his desire for excellence and professionalism led him to proceed to the United Kingdom and Ireland for his postgraduate and specialist training. He qualified as a specialist obstetrician and gynecologist and a surgeon, one of the best in Nigeria, leading to the bagging the FROCS, the MROCOG qualifications Senator John Oriaifo, like Professor Akila, one of the few Nigerians to earn his double distinction, is a fellow of Royal College of Physicians. To earn his double distinction, is a fellow of Royal College of Physicians and Gynecologists, FROCOG, UK, fellow Medical Council of Obstetrics and Gynecology, FMCOG, and fellow of International College of Surgeons, USA. He was also a member of the Educational Council of Foreign Medical Graduates. The Senate observed also as a humanitarian, he founded an orphan and vulnerable children project as OVC, which was supported by USAID through Family Health International that provided care and support services to 152 OVC in 2005. He also established a home-based care project that was supported by Global HIV/AIDS Initiative to help mitigate the impact of HIV/AIDS on people living positively. He was also involved in other caregiving organizations that benefit the less privileged, too numerous to mention. The study records that the District Senator John Osagale Oriaifo, who once served as a chairman of Okwewo local government, was elected in 1992 to represent Edo Central Senatorial District in the Senate from 1992, but following the annulment of June 12 election, his sojourn to the Senate was aborted. He served the nation with pride as a legislator, humanitarian, bridge builder, and a great force for national development, unity, and peace. The Senate knows that until his death, he was a member of the Elders Council, Edo State chapter of PDP. His demise is not only a colossal loss to his immediate family, in particular, the people of Edo State and Nigeria in general, as the nation stands to miss his service to humanity. The Senate is also aware that it is the tradition of this Distinguished Senate to honor our colleagues, past and present, even in death. Adieu, Senator John Osagale Oriaifo. The Senate accordingly resolved to 1. Observe a minute silence in honor of the departed former senator, and 2. Send a power delegation to condole with the family, people, and government of Edo State. I so move, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, there are two prayers here. One prayer is to observe. Who's going to second? James Manager, thank you.
Mr. President, my respected colleagues, James Manager, Delta South. Mr. President, I rise to second the motion as moved by my brother and my friend from Leaf Odia. I second.
Thank you very much, Senator James Manager. We go to prayers. Two prayers. 1. Observe a minute silence in honor of the departed former senator. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Second prayer. Send a high power delegation to condole with the family, people, and government of Edo State. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The single, let's rise up and observe 1 minute silence. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Amen. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of
Clerk of the Senate. Oh?
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the first business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Fatima Raji Rasaki on the Weights and Measures Implementation Agency Bill 2017. Mr. President, may we invite the Clerk of Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Weights and Measures Implementation Agency Bill 2017, SB 506, first reading.
Weights and Measures Implementation Agency Bill 2017, SB 506, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Ahmed Ogembe on the Federal University of Education Okene Establishment Etc. Bill 2017. Mr. President, we wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal University of Education Okene Establishment Etc. Bill 2017, SB 546, first reading.
Federal University of Education Okene Establishment Etc. Bill 2017, SB 546, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the third business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Suleiman Adokwe on the Nigerian Press Council Act 1992, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2017. Mr. President, may we invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Nigerian Press Council Act 1992, Repeal and Enactment Bill 2017, SB 547, first reading.
Nigerian Press Council Act 1992, Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2017, SB 547, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the fourth business of the day is the presentation of the report of the Committee on Trade and Investment on the Counterfeit Goods Prohibition Bill 2017. Mr. President, we wish to invite Senator Fatima Raji Rasaki, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the Senate to receive the report.
Senator Raji Rasaki.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Fatima Raji Rasaki, representing the Senate. I hereby move that the Senate will receive the report of the Committee on Trade and Investment on the Counterfeit Goods 2017, SB 117. I so move.
Senator Gobri.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, my name is Ibrahim Bogo. I second that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Trade and Investment on the Counterfeit Goods 2017 SB 117. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee of Trade and Investment on Counterfeit Goods, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Raji Rasaki, come and leave your report. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the fifth business of the day is the presentation of the report of the Committee on Power, Steel Development and Metallurgy on the Hydroelectric Power Producing Areas Development Commission Act 2010, Amendment Bill 2017. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Aina Abaribe, Chairman of the Committee, to move the motion for the Senate to receive the report.
Senator Abaribe.
Thank you, Mr. President. My esteemed colleagues, I hereby move, sir, that I present and lay the report of the Committee on Power, Steel Development and Metallurgy on the Hydroelectricity Power Producing Areas Development Commission Hyperdeck Amendment Bill 2017 SB 89. I so move.
Senator Marafa.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. Senator Kabiru Garba Marafa, representing Zamfara Central, arrived to second the motion that the Senate do receive the report from the Committee of Power on the amendment to Hyperdeck Bill. I so second, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do receive the report of the Committee on Power, Steel Development Methodology on the Hydroelectricity Power Producing Areas Development Commission Amendment Bill 2017 SB 89, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Bible, please come and lay your report. Leader of the Senate.
Very distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is a motion standing in the name of Senator Adamu Alero on the need for revenue mobilization, allocation, and fiscal commission to discharge its constitutional functions under paragraph 32 of the third schedule to the Constitution. Mr. President, may we invite Senator Adamu Alero to move the motion.
Senator Adamu Alero.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I mean Muhammad Adamu Alero, representing Kebbi Central. Mr. President, the motion I have is on the need for revenue mobilization, allocation of fiscal commission to discharge its constitutional responsibility under paragraph 32 of the third schedule to the Constitution. The Senate note that pursuant to paragraph 32 of the third schedule of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission was established to, among other things, review from time to time the revenue allocation formula and principles in operation to ensure conformity with changing realities, provided that any formula which has been accepted by an act of the National Assembly shall remain in force for a period of not less than 5 years from the date of commencement of the act. The President, distinguished colleagues, the Senate observed that the present revenue allocation formula has been in operation before the commencement of the democratic dispensation in 1999. The Senate is aware that there is no extant act of the National Assembly accepting the present revenue allocation formula, which means the formula in use now is unconstitutional. Attempts were made in the past, particularly in the 5th and the 6th Assembly, to table the revenue allocation formula. There was even a time the formula was sent from the presidency to the National Assembly. And while the deliberations were going on, the presidency wrote that the formula the Senate and the House is debating on did not emanate from the presidency. And as such, that formula mysteriously disappeared. The Senate notes that the Constitution does not contemplate that a particular revenue formula be enforced in perpetuity. In fact, the Constitution requires the formula to be reviewed every 5 years. The Senate notes that the current formula is blind to the present and changing economic realities and unjustifiably skewed in favor of the federal government. The Senate is aware that most of the states of the Federation are under the bailout of the federal government, which runs into billions of naira. Because of this bailout, most of the states are deeply in debt. And the fear is that successive state governments are going to inherit huge and unsurmountable debts. We all know that a number of states are unable to pay salaries and pensions, and they immediately run to the federal government to come and ask for bailout. This bailout is not a grant. It is a loan given to them. And as such, there is serious danger of debt overhang on the states. What is that unless the present formula is reviewed in favor of the states and local government, real growth and development will continue to elude this country. Presently, Mr. President, the revenue allocation formula has allocated close to about 62% if you add ecological fund and everything to the federal government, while the remaining amount is shared among the two tiers of government. This, I believe, is outrageous. The Senate accordingly resolved to add the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to discharge its constitutional duties and functions. 2, direct the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to review the present formula to reflect the present and changing economic realities of our country. And 3, urge the federal government to table the proposed revenue allocation formula before the National Assembly for deliberation and passage into law. Distinguished colleagues, this is a very straightforward motion. It's only asking the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to discharge its constitutional responsibility under the 1999 Constitution. And now it's close to about 20 years since the present democratic dispensation. We don't have a revenue allocation formula that has been approved by the National Assembly. I could recall the present formula came about in 1998. That is before 1999. It means it's close to about 19 years. And every revenue allocation formula is supposed to be reviewed in every 5 years. Any revenue allocation formula approved by the National Assembly is supposed to be reviewed within 5 years. So I urge my colleagues to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seconding the motion. Yes, Senator Matthew Ogide.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm Senator Matthew Urogide. I represent the South and Federal District, Edo State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I lend my voice in supporting this motion, ably moved by Senator Oali. While in supporting this motion, Mr. President, I want to go back to the real issue, that is being canvassed here, which is the sharing, formula of revenue that accrues into the Federation account. Even though my distinguished colleague, Senator Alero, has said that it has to be, in favor of the states and local governments, to some extent, who have, of course, we express some reservation. But that yes, the thing has been enforced for a very long time, since 1999, is enough to say yes, this sharing formula must be reviewed. I agree. Mr. President, the fears that we have always had over revenue sharing in this country can be tied to some of the actions that we took yesterday, which we described under, devolution of power. The sharing of revenue from federation accounts in this country, to a very large extent, has been bedeviled because our states and local governments have become too lazy to look for other sources of revenue in our different states. In as much as I agree that the revenue formula has become obsolete and therefore must be reviewed, the states and local governments too must stand up to the responsibility of the revenue that they collect. We know today that these states and local governments have not been able to use their revenue very positively in the direction of bettering the life of our people. That is why when the amendment that was sought yesterday, Mr. President, some of us supported that a few of the items that are on the exclusive list be removed and put on the concurrent list so that the states too can have a wide latitude for activities, economic activities that can make them to earn more money. What Senator Ali has alluded to now, which is very right, to say the formula must be changed, but I believe this one can make the states even more, I would say lazier than what they have been. Therefore, in as much as I support this, the sharing formula, which of course must still come from Revenue Allocation and Fiscal Allocation Commission, must be such that we still be able to stimulate the interest and the very necessary zeal that the states and local governments require to be able to generate their own funds. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Distinguished colleagues, we go straight to prayers. One, urge the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to discharge the constitutional duties and functions. Those in favor of prayer one, say aye. Those against, say nay. There is a prayer two, direct the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to review the present revenue allocation formula or to reflect the present and changing economic realities of our country. Those in favor of prayer two, say aye. Those against, say nay. There is a prayer three, urge the federal government to table the proposed revenue collection formula before the National Assembly for deliberation and pass into law. Those in favor of prayer 3 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day, the second order of the day is a motion. Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is a motion standing in the name of Senator Ross Oko and 5 others on the Bakassi indigenes in diaspora in the Cameroon. Mr. President, you recall that on Tuesday, 20th July 2017, the Senate-wide order for 2 of our standing order approved that this motion be moved on the next legislative day, which is today. Accordingly, you may wish to invite Senator Rosoko to move the motion.
Senator Rosoko.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Rose Oko, Cross River North. Bakassi indigenes in diaspora in the Cameroon. The Senate notes that the Bakassi indigenes of Cross River and Akwa Ibom State had resided in the geographic area known as the Bakassi Peninsula for generations. The Senate notes that following arrangements and treaties from 1885 between Britain, Germany and France over the boundary between Nigeria and Cameroon and actions between the two governments, Nigeria and Cameroon, the ownership of the Bakassi Peninsula became contentious. The Senate notes that on 29 March 1994, Cameroon took the matter to the International Court of Justice, and on 10th of October 2002, the ICJ ruled in favor of Cameroon. The Senate also notes that on 12th June 2006, an agreement between the two countries, known as the Green Tree Agreement, was signed for the withdrawal of Nigerian troops and the ceding of the Bakassi Peninsula to the Cameroons peacefully. The Senate further notes that the Green Tree Agreement had the following provisions concerning the status of Nigerians living in the peninsula. Cameroon would, A, not force Nigerian nationals living in the Bakassi Peninsula to leave the zone or change their nationality. B, respect their culture, language, and beliefs. C, respect their rights to continue their agricultural and fishing activities. D, protect their properties, customary rights, land rights. E, not levy in any discriminatory manner any taxes and other dues on Nigerian nationals living in the zone. And F, take every necessary measure to protect Nigerian nationals living in the zone from any harassment or harm. Thus, Cross River and Akwa Ibom States indigenes, formerly Nigerians, had become Nigerians living in diaspora in the Cameroon. The Senate is alarmed that these Nigerians, already traumatized by suddenly finding themselves as foreigners in their natural habitat, are being subjected to further harassment. The Senate is concerned that those that returned after the ICJ ruling and the Green Tree Agreement had not been properly resettled back in Nigeria, living in makeshift accommodation for several years now. The Senate is alarmed that about a few weeks ago, a large number of Bakassi indigenes in the Cameroon returned to Nigeria in grave distress. It is further alarmed that 97 Nigerians were feared to have been killed in an attack by Cameroon gendarmes over failure to pay a discriminatory boat levy of 100,000 naira. The attack was targeted mainly at Nigerians from Akwa Ibom, Cross River, and Ondo states. The Senate notes that even if preliminary investigations have revealed, as is reported in the media, that they were not killed but died in the sea, the fact remains that they were obviously fleeing from their host country in distress. The Senate further notes that the causes of the flights need to be investigated and identified. The Senate is very concerned that this action clearly violates Agreement's Article 3.2, E and F listed above of the Green Tree Agreement. It is very alarmed at growing discriminatory treatment of Nigerians in diaspora, often leading to death, as has been the case in South Africa and indeed the Cameroon since after the ceding of the Bakassi Peninsula. The Senate notes that indeed Nigerians in diaspora in the Bakassi have suffered attacks leading to death on several occasions in the past. It is very worried that if the Nigerian government does not come up with a definite policy of protecting its citizens, Nigerians in diaspora, especially in Africa and other regions, will continue to witness xenophobic attacks, killings, and harassment. The Senate is saddened that these things are happening despite the huge resources and benevolence that Nigeria had expended on and shown to our African brothers. The Senate accordingly resolved to A. Condemn in strong terms the actions of the Cameroonian gendarmes against Nigerians in the Bakassi Peninsula. B. Call on government to come up with a clear policy on the protection of her indigenes in the diaspora, especially those that live within the ambit of the law. C. Call on the Cameroonian government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to respect the provisions of the Green Tree Agreement. D. Investigate the recent harassment of Bakassi indigenes in the Cameroon that led to the death of several of them and their mass return. And E. Call on NEMA to immediately send relief to the returnees to reach them and direct it to. F. Refer to the matter to the Committees on Diaspora and Foreign Affairs to report back within 2 weeks. I so move, Mr. President.
Senator Akpabio.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I rise to second this motion, heavily moved by my colleague, distinguished Senator Rose Oko. Mr. President, the issue of Bakassi has become a turning point in the history of liquidation, suffering, and death. As a matter of fact, what is contained in this paper is something that should be of international interest. When I was the governor, most of the Bakassi returnees used to block the gate of Government House almost on a weekly basis because of neglect. I believe strongly that Nigeria has failed its citizens who live in the Bakassi, and up to today, many of them are still living in Plenary, in makeshift structures, and many have died. We were able to take care of some in terms of education, but unfortunately, the generality of those who returned, I could say over 75% of them were Akwa Ibom indigenes. And Bakassi happened to have been a place that we used to call a camp. The camp simply was like a fishing settlement that for over 500 years had belonged to Nigeria. But unfortunately, because of politics, what happened with the International Court of Justice. Mr. President, this is a clear case of breach of international agreement, a clear case of breach of international convention. Anything you can think about, we do everything to protect our citizens. As of today, sir, the Bakassi Peninsula has become a den for criminals. We are now having what they call Bakassi freedom fighters commencing insurgency from that area.
attacking our people on the seashore. Nobody is allowed to fish unless you have a special flag. And that flag means that you are paid 100,000 for that day to be able to enter the sea. And sometimes you go into the sea and come out and you don't even catch enough fish that will sell up to 10,000 naira. But you must pay 100,000 to the Cameroonian tender. So this has become such a terrible situation that when you don't pay the money, they take you out of the boat and throw you into the sea. So many people have died. Thousands of our people have been killed. And very recently, they now went down and then imposed further levies for even entering into your home. All sorts of illegal levies. Some of them have been raped, so many children, some of them have been enslaved. And then unfortunately, Nigeria does not seem to care. So it is important that this bill come before these hallowed chambers, and it is important that we, as the representatives of the people, rise up to speak against this. We must not only speak here in chambers, we must call on the federal government to do everything possible to call on the Cameroonian authorities to respect the agreements that were entered into. And if there is need, we must find a way to even attempt to review the ICJ decision by going back to the same court to let them know that everything that was agreed upon, including this joint agreement, nothing had been adhered to. So I want to support this motion and at the same time second it and say that yes, indeed, it is a step in the right direction. Let the hallowed chamber be the first to shout out. Thousands are dying. The primary purpose of government, as enshrined in Section 14, subsection 2B of our Constitution, is the protection of lives and the welfare of citizens. And when we have failed woefully like this, and people are not only suffering, but they are dying on a daily basis, and then they use Nigerians to train. The gendarmes are using Nigerians in the Bakassi Peninsula to train, and to train with new bullets. People are dying on a daily basis, and they cannot even fish. There is total fear around that area. And above all, it is even affecting national security. We are taking this up with the National Security Advisor because the insurgency that is coming from there, all the criminals now are running towards that area. Militancy is coming from that area. The Calabar that used to be very peaceful is no longer peaceful. People are calling it cultism, but the reality is that the insurgency is coming from the same Bakassi area. Right in our backyard, we have an army that may threaten the lives and security of the nation, not just the Bakassi children that are dying today. I want to say, sir, that with all seriousness, we must take this seriously, and when the prayers come, we'll try to amend some in order to show the seriousness that this issue entails. I so second, sir.
Distinguished colleagues, prayer one, condemn in strong terms the actions of the Cameroon gendarmes against Nigerians in Bakassi Peninsula. Those in favor of prayer one say aye. Those against say nay. Yes, I will. Call on the federal government to come up with a clear policy on the protection of our indigenes in diaspora, especially those that live within the ambit of the law. Those in favor of prayer two say aye. Those against say nay. Yes, I will. Call on Cameroonian government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to respect the provisions of the Green Tree Agreement. Those in favor of prayer three say aye. Those against say nay. Yes, I will. Prayer 4, investigate the recent harassment of Bakassi indigenes in the Cameroon that led to the death of some of them and their mass return. Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. Yes, I will. Call on NEMA to immediately send relief to the returnees to reach them directly. Those in favor of prayer 5 say aye. Those against say nay. Yes, I will. Prayer 6, refer the matter to the Committee on Diaspora and Foreign Affairs to report back in 2 weeks. Those in favor of prayer 6 say aye. Those against say nay. Yes, I will. Additional prayer, minority leader.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, the additional prayer will be that we should invite the Honourable Minister of External Affairs to appear before the Senate Committee on both diaspora and foreign affairs to brief these hallowed chambers of the efforts made to implement this Green Tree Agreement and how far they've gone, and the efforts made to protect lives and citizens of the Bakassi Peninsula.
If we're asking the committees to investigate this matter, clearly they will call the ministers to appear before them. Yeah. So, yes, Senator Gesham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gesham Bassi, Cross River South. I think there's a need for us to look at the ratification of the Green Tree Agreement, which has yet to be ratified by this National Assembly. So I think there's a need to look into that entire issue.
What's your prayer? What's your prayer? Your mic.
The prayer is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should forward the Green Tree Agreement to the National Assembly for work, for us to look into, for ratification.
Seconder. Yes, Senator Mao.
Yes, Mr. President, distinguished Senator Mao, I stand to second the motion heavily moved by
that the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs should be mandated to forward the Green Tree Agreement for ratification of the Parliament.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of additional prayer to call on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to forward the treaty on the agreement on the Green Tree Agreement for ratification. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day is the second reading of the Host Communities Entitlement and Protection Bill 2017. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Thursday, 8th December 2016. Mr. President, may we invite Senator Kabir Marafa to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Senator Kabir Marafa.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished and respectable colleagues. Kabiru Garba Marafa, representative of our Central, arise today to lead the debate on Petroleum Host Community Bill 2017. Mr. President, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, it is my honor and privilege. You have copies? It is my honor and privilege to lead the debate on this very important bill, sponsored by my humble self and members of the Joint Committee on Petroleum Resources. This bill was read the first time in this chamber on Thursday, 8th December 2016. The bill seeks to provide for legal framework for the host communities in Nigeria. This bill is unique because it recognizes the pitfalls of past efforts and structured to bring direct funding for the development of petroleum host communities under the direction and the control of the communities themselves. This bill, when enacted into law, will create the much desired harmony and partnership among the various stakeholders in the petroleum operations processes and engender huge cost savings, extensive investments, and overall transformation of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, permit me to briefly provide the background and necessary insight into the bill to enable you to understand and also share the urgency found in our request for the second reading of this bill. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, agitation for participation of the host community in the petroleum business and the conferment of financial and other benefits of the industry of such communities is as old as the petroleum industry in Nigeria. In fact, this has been a critical issue of deliberation at several national forums and even here in the National Assembly. Over the years, government has attempted to address this issue by providing various forms of palliatives to the host communities, but this has always fallen short of the expectations of the people in the manner in which it was conceived. Following the submission of the report of the Oil and Gas Implementation Committee, OGIC, containing the Nigerian Oil and Gas Policy and the premier draft of the Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB, to government in 2008. The late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, may his gentle soul rest in peace, set up the interagency team, IAT, to review the policy and the bill. The IAT review sought to augment the PIB, which was then already before the National Assembly, with provisions providing for petroleum host community participation. Since then, Mr. President, the petroleum host community participation clause has been an integral part of the PIB or its attendant debates. This bill is part of the legislative reform of the Nigerian oil and gas industry, providing for the development of petroleum host communities, and is presented in line with the perspective of the 8th Senate, split the PIB into smaller logical portions to allow for easy consideration, passage, and where necessary, future amendment. The objective of this bill
Mr. President, is to primarily curb the restiveness in the Niger Delta by assuaging the fears of the petroleum host communities and providing a veritable regime of compensation directly to the communities to enable them develop their local infrastructure, educate their people, access health care and a livelihood, and cope with the devastated environment they were that was foisted on them by the poorly managed petroleum producing activities of the oil company. Mr. President, my very respectable colleagues, it is for the above reasons that we are presenting this bill for a second reason to this distinguished Senate today. Mr. President and my distinguished colleague, this bill seeks to establish a pool of funding for development of petroleum host communities and specifies the sources of this funding. Especially, it provides for the host communities development to be funded through a direct contribution from petroleum producing companies. Furthermore, it provides for the utilization of the fund and states clearly that the principal items to which the fund shall be devoted shall be socio-economic development, infrastructure, education, and other contingent matters. In addition to identifying the communities that qualify, the bill also defines the ratios of distribution of benefits among the different categories of communities. The bill also defines petroleum host communities which shall be beneficiaries of the fund. It also delimits which communities qualify to be included. Finally, the bill also provides reciprocal responsibilities on the part of the communities by creating grounds for deductions from the share of the communities for repairs of any damaged oil facilities resulting from sabotage. The bill also creates the legal structures for the Petroleum Host Community Association. It details the legal framework as well as governance and accountability. In addition, it also set out the requirements for account and audit of funds paid to the host community associations. Furthermore, the bill creates a national committee on petroleum host communities, which will be established to carry out specific tasks with respect to the various community funds created under the bill. This special committee is deliberately designed not to be an operational organization, but a small advisory body which provides support to the Petroleum Host Community Association when required. The bill provides that the committee shall have representatives from the beneficiary communities, oil-producing companies, and the government. Part 3 also provides for a small secretariat for the committee, a pool of funding for development of petroleum host communities, and specifies the sources of this funding. Specifically, it provides for the petroleum host communities development to be funded through a direct contribution from petroleum producing companies. Furthermore, it provides for the utilization of the fund and states clearly that the principal items to which the fund shall be devoted shall be socio-economic development, infrastructure, education, and other contingent matters. In addition to identifying the communities that qualify, the bill also defines the ratios of distribution of benefits among different categories of communities. The bill also creates the legal structures for the Petroleum Host Community Association. It details the legal framework as well as governance and accountability. In addition, it also sets out the requirements for account and audit of funds paid to Petroleum Host Community Association. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, in line with our Order 77 Sub 3, the financial implications of this bill proposes inter alia the registration of Petroleum Host Community Associations and National Committee on Petroleum Host Communities. The cost of registration of the petroleum host communities associations will be borne by the relevant communities, while the running cost of the National Committee on Petroleum Host will be deducted from the funds payable to the petroleum host communities, payable by the petroleum producing companies. Therefore, no funds are needed to be appropriated by this National Assembly for funding of host community associations and National Committee on Petroleum Host Communities. Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, let me conclude by stating that this bill proposes a clear, focused, effective and robust legal framework for managing and funding host community development in Nigeria. The framework will take into cognizance the aspirations of the host communities while also navigating the program away from the pitfalls of the past exercises to bring development funding directly to the communities. I can confidently state that this framework has the potential to redirect the long-standing agitations of the petroleum host communities and the anxieties of government and oil-producing communities, companies, into a happy partnership in which all stakeholders, including government, oil-producing companies, and communities forge a common agenda to ensure peace and harmony in all spheres of petroleum operations. Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, I believe that the objectives and provisions of this bill are very, very laudable and will transform the Nigerian oil and gas industry. This bill will provide the requisite support to the host communities who have borne the brunt of oil production activities. Most importantly, the peace that will ensue from the passage of this bill will attract substantial investment to the Nigerian oil and gas industry. At this critical time that such investments are required to stimulate growth in the industry with its concomitant effect on other sectors of the Nigerian economy. Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, let me at this juncture add that in the past, two issues arguably militated against the passage of PIB by previous national assemblies. One of those was the Frontier Exploration Agency, which in the wise council of this ex-assembly, under your leadership, Mr. President, has been taken care of, and today oil explorations are going on in the northern part of Nigeria, and we expect very positive results in the very future. With the solution given to the frontier exploration, the next contentious issue is the host community bill that we are presenting today. And Mr. President, there is no saying the fact that a happy host will definitely yield a happy guest. So with these few remarks, I want to urge all of you to support the second reading and the committal of this very important bill to the Joint Committee on Petroleum Resources without debate. I so move, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Marifa. Distinguished colleagues, just before I take someone to contribute on this is a straightforward matter. If you can all recollect, when we passed the PID governance bill, we made a commitment here that the host community bill will follow very quickly behind it. We're already behind in time, and I think it's in the spirit of that we've brought this here today. So I'll take. Is anybody against this? Senator James Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President, my respected colleagues. James Manager, CON, Delta South. Mr. President, this is not a motion, and therefore I will speak very briefly in support of this all-important bill. And Mr. President, you have said it all. While we are taking the first bill out of the four of them, from the defunct PIB, in fact, during the debate, we had exhaustive discussion, and this particular one also came up very strongly for discussion. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, the bill itself, the lead debate, has captured almost everything. Senator Marafa and his colleagues have done a thorough job. In fact, on the body of the lead debate, page 1, he said this, and this is very apt. This bill, when enacted into law, will create much desired harmony and partnership among the various stakeholders in the petroleum operations process and engender huge cost savings, extensive investment and overall transformation of Nigeria and oil and gas industry. Mr. President, they captured it all. It is very, very clear. And of course, if you look at page 2, again, the first paragraph, Marafa has this to say. Over the years, government has attempted to address the issue by providing various forms of palliatives to the host communities, but this has always fallen short of the expectations of the people in the manner in which it was conceived. Mr. President, the lead debate has said it all. It has said it all. And there is no way we can move forward as a country if we don't address some of these very important issues. They are nowhere, and particularly coming from Marafa, all the way from Zamfara State. And of course, Zamfara State people must be interested in this bill. Just like the Sokoto people, the people from Bauchi, from everywhere, wherever you come from in this country, you must be interested in this bill. Because if this bill is passed through and the people are happy there, then you are also a very happy people. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, this bill is very important. Although, Mr. President, my respected colleagues, throughout the lead debate, Marafa didn't mention what percentage is going to the host communities. He didn't mention, but I want to believe that the details are in the bill. The details are in the bill. And therefore, Mr. President, I lend my support for this bill on behalf of my people, and I also see almost all the senators agreeing to this particular bill. To God Almighty be the glory. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Distinguished colleagues, before I put to vote, I can anticipate the clarification that Senator and Senator, you want to listen, because I know your clarification. The issues to do with frontier issues is going to be taken under the second bill on fiscal regime. All right. So I put the question. Those in favor that this bill be read the second time, say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. This bill, yeah, clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for framework relating to petroleum producing host communities' participation, cost and benefit sharing amongst the government, petroleum exploration companies, and the petroleum host communities, and for related matters 2017, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide for framework relating to petroleum producing host communities' participation, cost and benefit sharing amongst the government, petroleum exploration companies, and petroleum host communities, and for related matter 2017, second reading. This bill is referred to the Joint Committee of Upstream, Downstream and Gas. Report back in 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues,
the fourth order of the day, second reading of the Petroleum Industry Fiscal Bill 2017. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Thursday, 27th April 2017. Mr. President, may we invite Senator Omotayo Alashadura to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Senator Alashadura.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Omotayo Alashadura, representing Ondo Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, it is my honor and privilege to lead the debate on the Petroleum Industry Fiscal Bill. The first reading of the bill took place on the 27th day of April 2017. The bill seeks to attract and sustainably encourage investments in the petroleum industry whilst increasing accruable revenues to the government of Nigeria. Mr. President and very honored and distinguished colleagues, permit me to briefly provide the background, objectives, principles, and summary of the content of this bill, on the basis of which we seek your support for the second reading. The petroleum sector is one of the major contributors to the Nigerian economy and commands continuous attention by the government and its people. The existing fiscal framework for the industry in Nigeria is complex and many parts are in conflict with one another. Indeed, so many amendments of the Primary Act have been enacted into law and in some cases not readily available to investors and operators of the industry, since these exist as separate regulations. Thus, this bill consists of the totality of the legal instruments which government applies to extract rents from companies operating in the upstream sector and for collecting revenues from companies operating in the downstream. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the existing legislations under the Nigerian fiscal regime include the following: Petroleum Profit Tax Act as amended, Petroleum Act as amended, Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Act as amended, the first Memorandum of Understanding MOU signed between industry operators and government, 1986. I'm sorry, this thing was done upside down. Then the Finance Miscellaneous Taxation Provisions Decrees 1996 to 1999, and finally Companies Income Tax Act Cap 621 of LFN 2004 as amended. These legislations, which are mostly outdated and out of touch with current realities, will be repealed by the passage of this bill. The imperative of the consideration of this bill is born out of the challenges faced by the existing fiscal system, including 1. Legislative uncertainties surrounding appropriate regime from operators in the industry, definition issues, application of correct pricing to products and revenue determination, cost recognition, capital allowances claims, filing of returns, and payment of taxes. Lack of fiscal neutrality, where, for example, a player with associated gas sets off gas costs against crude oil, while another player claims gas costs under company's income tax regime, or where different royalty rates are applied to different players with similar product base. Lack of clarity around gas revenues under production sharing contracts, leading to long-term disputes with contractors. Elimination of dual tax rates and crude pricing for tax purposes. High petroleum profit tax rate at 85%. This is not competitive with what is happening all over the world. lack of enabling fiscal protection for domestic refining to align with the policy of maximizing value add locally, as well as protecting unintended sharp practices in a sector that is still evolving and traditionally known to have tight profit margins. Government participation without adequate operational cost control measures, difficulties and uncertainties of tax assessment and collection between the FIRS and NNPC. Difficulties in assessing cost data, especially for the independent operator. Lack of cluster or integrated development planning and operating philosophies to minimize cost and maximize government take. Need for review of the Associated Gas Framework Agreement terms and assess its continuous relevance or suitability. Lack of flexibility in the existing legislation with respect to windfall tax when crude oil price increases and incentives when it decreases, thus denying the government appropriate take during high prices and fair take during low oil prices to sustain investment. And finally, inability of the government to fund its equity in joint venture operations. All these call for new directions motivated by new objectives, new principles, new framework, and invariably new legislation that will address all these obvious gaps. Objectives of the PIFB. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the primary purpose of the Petroleum Industry Fiscal Bill is to have fully developed fiscal sustainable, safe, secure, environmentally friendly, efficient and integrated petroleum operations for the social, economic development of Nigeria. The bill will establish a fiscal framework that will guide the planning and development of petroleum resources in a rational and sustainable manner for the social, economic development of Nigeria. The measurable objectives of this bill shall include, but not limited to, establish a progressive fiscal framework that encourages substantial and progressive investment in the petroleum industry, balancing rewards with risk and enhancing revenues to the federal government of Nigeria. Institute a forward-looking fiscal framework that is based on core principles of clarity, dynamism, neutrality, open access, and fiscal rules of general application. Provide clear distinction between legislative aspects of the fiscal regime and negotiated aspects of contractual obligations. One of the things we are saying here is that today we have deep offshore oil installations. We have those that are in shallow waters, and we have those that are on the wells. And we are developing rapidly the frontier exploration of oil in Nigeria. So if we don't have proper fiscal laws in place, we will not be able to dichotomize, on how taxes and other costs will be made. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the design of fiscal regimes is a critical factor in shaping perceptions of petroleum industry competitiveness, especially in the area of high volatility in oil prices and the need to maximize both investors and government objectives. A poorly designed fiscal regime will lead to undermining production operations and or consequent decline in production and revenue generation. A summary of the key fiscal principles of a desirable fiscal regime is provided below. Neutrality. Avoids investment and reward distortion. The fiscal regime should not alter the order in which projects are undertaken, nor should it change the speed of operations, decisions about reinvestment, etc. It should not be the sole reason why an investment is made. Similarly, it should not be the reason why an investment is not made. What we are saying there is that once a contract has been entered to, the law should stipulate and ensure that you cannot vary it until such contract have been carried through. Capture of rent. This principle satisfies the neutrality criterion, enables the government to share in the upside of projects, and supports the government's role as owner of the neutral resources. Stability and timing of revenue. This principle provides for a stable revenue stream to government. Governments favor stable and early revenue. However, the counterpoint to this goal is a transfer of risk to the investor and delayed payback. This objective should be less of a concern when there are multiple fields at different stages of development. Progressivity and adaptability ensures progressivity. A progressive regime uses a rising government take as the project's profitability increases. A system that responds flexibly to changes in prices and costs might be perceived as more stable, lowering the investor's perceived risk of regime stability and avoiding the rent-seeking behavior associated with discretionary changes. It also ensures a low tax burden on marginal projects, like what we are trying to experience in the north now. All the monies that are being expended, we cannot recoup them in a day when this frontier exploration started yielding. Administrative simplicity and enforceability. This principle emphasizes and supports ease of administration. To the maximum extent possible, given other objectives, the regime should be transparent and simple to administer. It should also be designed to avoid leakages through abusive transfer principles and other tax avoidance practices. International competitiveness. This principle emphasizes and supports competitiveness. Adjusting for investors' perceptions of country risk, the regime should be competitive relative to those of other countries in order to attract investment. Of course, the world is a global village, and if we make Nigeria an island of its own, we will not attract the necessary investment. In-country value add. This principle provides enabling fiscal protection for domestic refining to align with the policy of maximizing value add locally, as well as protecting unintended sharp practices in a sector that is still evolving and traditionally known to have high profit margins. Structure. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the bill is divided into 8 parts and is scheduled. Part 1 deals with the objectives of the bill, while Part 2 provides for the administration of the bill, adjustment factors, and special products. It also contains provisions for frontier acreages and ultra-deep water. Part 3 stipulates a new requirement for all petroleum companies to pay companies income tax under the Companies Income Tax Act. Part 4 and Part 5 provide for rent, royalties, and tax. Part 6 provides for the various payments and allocation systems to regulate the production sharing contracts and other contracts. Part 7 and 8 respectively contain the miscellaneous provisions and the repeals, transitional and savings provisions. Highlights of the provisions of the bill. The following are the key highlights of this bill. The bill makes provision for the fiscal terms and instruments, rents, royalties, taxes, and incentives for the entire petroleum industry value chain, including upstream, midstream, and downstream operations. It seeks to provide general terms for exploration and producing companies that may wish to venture into the frontier and the ultra-deep acreages. The bill offers new rates for rents for land coverage by petroleum exploration licenses, petroleum prospecting licenses, and petroleum mining leases. The bill also stipulates comprehensive and progressive natural gas terms and instruments for the development of the abundant natural gas resources of Nigeria. It also designs a progressive fiscal system for upstream, midstream, and downstream oil and gas operations. The bill reinforces fiscal neutrality, provides clear definitions of upstream and downstream gas operations, distinct from midstream oil and midstream gas operations, and likewise for downstream oil and downstream gas operations. This bill provides for improvements in the system of tax administration in the petroleum industry by inclusively repealing and reenacting the Petroleum Profit Tax Act to help the Federal Inland Revenue Service to properly and effectively administer the tax system for the industry. It seeks to remove the distortions in associated gas framework agreement from the effective cross-subsidy of oil to gas sector. Sorry. Nine, the bill provides for improvement in the system of tax administration in the petroleum industry and provides tools to help Federal Inland Revenue Service to properly and effectively administer tax instruments for the industry. Further, the bill also provides tools for Nigerian Petroleum Regulatory Commission to properly, effectively, efficiently, and equitably administer the rent and royalty schemes prescribed in the law. Financial implications. There are no financial implications as far as this bill is concerned. Statutory requirement for financial implications, all those are stated there. In conclusion, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, this bill proposes a slim, focused, yet robust fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry. Principles of neutrality, progressivity, flexibility, simplicity, and adaptability have been adopted to capture economic trends equitably, ethically, effectively, and efficiently to enhance investment performance and government revenue in particular. Key lapses associated with prior fiscal framework have been remedied. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, I believe that the objectives and provisions of this bill are very laudable and will transform the Nigerian oil and gas industry and attract substantial investment to the industry at this critical time that such investments are required to stimulate growth in the industry with its concomitant effect on other sectors of the Nigerian economy. I therefore urge you all to support the second reading of this bill and its committal to the committees for detailed legislative consideration. I thank you all.
Senator Geshambasi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Geshambasi, Cross River South Senatorial District. Mr. President, I rise to second the second reading of this bill. We have seen recently that simply by amending laws, certain countries, namely Mexico and Colombia, have achieved significant inflows into their oil and gas industry. I think that this bill seeks to bring our fiscal regime in line with international best practices, and therefore I urge my colleagues to support this motion. I so second.
Anybody against this bill being read second? So let me put the questions. Those in favor that this bill read second, I say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, the bill for an act to establish a fiscal framework that encourage further investment in the petroleum industry while increasing accruable revenue to the federal government of Nigeria and for other connected matters, 2017, second reading.
A bill for an act to establish a fiscal framework that encourage further investment in the petroleum industry whilst increasing accruable revenues to the federal government of Nigeria and for other connected matters, 2017, second reading taken. This bill is referred to the Joint Committee on Petroleum, Upstream, Downstream, and Gas report back in folks. I thank you, the members of the distinguished senators on your comments here. This bill now at the committee level, please kindly ensure that we involve all stakeholders so that their contributions can let us have a bill that is acceptable and implementable. And the whole purpose of us doing it now, so that over the recess period, work can be done. The principle, as we agreed, must be a win-win, where government will win and also the stakeholders and investors will win. And as you rightly said, it must be, we cannot, as Nigeria, be in isolation. We must think about it. It is a very competitive environment, and it's a bill that will bring investors into the country. Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, the fifth order of the day is the second reading of the Petroleum Industry Administration Bill 2017. Distinguished senators will report that the bill was read the first time in this chamber yesterday, Tuesday, 25th July. Not yesterday. It was read on Tuesday, 25th July 2017. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Bakassi to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Senator Bakassi.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished and respected colleagues, Senator Bakassi Akpan, Akwa Ibom Northeast. Mr. President, this bill is co-sponsored by all members of the Senate committees on gas, downstream and upstream. Mr. President, my distinguished and respected colleagues, it is my honor and privilege to lead this debate on the Nigerian Petroleum Industry Administration Bill 2017. This bill was read for the first time in this chamber on the 25th day of July 2017. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, the Nigerian Petroleum Industry Administration Bill 2017 seeks to provide for a new legal framework for the administration of the upstream, downstream, midstream sectors of the Nigerian petroleum industry. It seeks to provide effective administration of the entire industry and to open up the industry for investment and growth. Therefore, this law has the capacity to create the much desired expansion of the industry by unleashing an inflow of new entrants into the petroleum operations, which will be accompanied by substantial new investments and overall transformation of Nigerian oil and gas industry. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, permit me to briefly provide the background and necessary insight into the bill to enable you to understand our cogent request for the second reading of this bill. We are all aware that the basic legal framework for the administration of our petroleum industry is the Petroleum Act Cap 350 of 1990 as amended, which came into force on the 27th day of November 1969, along with its several tributary regulations made at the behest and in pursuance of the Petroleum Act. This act was enacted during the infancy of the Nigerian petroleum industry, and its main objective was to provide for the regulation and administration of an infantile industry. Over time, the petroleum industry has evolved in several dimensions, including new discoveries of commercial hydrocarbons around the world, scope of operations, push from the competing energy sources, the environment, and the role of gas resources, cost structure, know-how, technology, people, geopolitics, volatility of prices and markets. These forces render the Petroleum Act ineffective and inefficient for the administration of the Nigerian petroleum industry. The Act has become outdated and inadequate for the administration of the Nigerian petroleum industry. In fact, it has become a hindrance in the process of contemporary petroleum management. The problems created by the extant petroleum administration regime can be summarized as follows: an outdated